Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show.
The Ontario Disability Employment Network's annual Rethinking Disability Conference wrapped up yesterday. But my coverage of the event continues because on Monday I had a chance to speak with a number of presenters from the event. I interviewed them remotely from this studio here in Toronto. And I had a chance to speak with Maureen Haan as part of that coverage. Maureen is the president and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. She is also a board member for Accessibility Standards Canada. She discussed the progress of the Accessible Canada Act. So here's my conversation with Maureen now. Hi, Maureen. How are you doing today?
Good, Alex. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So your seminar focuses on reviewing the Accessible Canada Act. Why is it so valuable and important to provide an in-depth review?
So I think that we're really going to be focusing on the standard that has been developed for inclusive employment. So employment for people with disabilities, because a new standard has just been released. It's under review right now. And I think it's really important for everybody to understand what that means and how people can get involved.
And so what are the biggest questions, concerns that you have or that you have come across with regards to the ACA and the new standards?
So I will tell you, I feel that the standard for employment is actually a very good standard. I feel it's quite robust. The consultations that we did also felt that it hits everything that it needs to hit for employment for people with disabilities, both focusing on what the workers' needs are and what the business needs are, where people need to be aware of accommodations, for example, policies, et cetera, et cetera. There were just three areas that we felt needed to have a little bit more of an emphasis. Can I tell you what those three areas were?
Absolutely. Please tell me more.
So the first one is talking about disability confidence. So throughout the standard, there's a little bit of jargon here and a little bit of jargon there, but what we really want to do is pump up the fact that employers and businesses need to be disability confident in their hiring practices. Their hiring, their onboarding, when people with disabilities are their employees, all the way up to advancement, and then of course exiting a job. If you're not disability confident, then sometimes that flips into a bit of a disability management system where you're thinking about it's more about insurance and you're thinking about it's about an injured worker rather than this is a person with a disability. How can I make my workplace disability confident in order to make sure that this person brings their best self to work? So that's the first area. And then the second area that we talked about is an accommodation fund, a national accommodation fund. We feel that if there is such a thing as undue hardship, for example, that employers are saying it's too expensive to do an accommodation, that we're calling for the national government to have a national accommodation fund that small to medium-sized employers would be able to access. And then they would be able to get that funding to be able to provide the accommodations to their workers and then not have that undue hardship. And I have to be honest with you, the third one has escaped my mind at this moment. I don't know why.
That's not a problem at all.
Two of the three.
Two of the three. That's still they're very positive in terms of really trying to establish that it's like the accommodations are basically just being woven into any basic workplace, that these should just really not reflect going out of your way to really create a new standard for an employee. This should just be ingrained in Canadian workplaces across the country. And I think that's really kind of the philosophy that seems to kind of permeate through, especially with even the ACA and just trying to make all of Canada, just especially on the federal side, accessible for anyone and just barrier-free.
Exactly.
And they've established that date of 2040. Where we are currently, do you feel confidence in that goal being reached, and then in focusing in on the employment side that, you know, the standards and the changes that have been put forward, that they're going to be adopted and widespread come January 1st, 2040?
So it's a good question, and I don't have a crystal ball, of course. I will say that I think that we've got ourselves set up properly for it. I think it's a big task. I think it's an arduous task. I think that it needs everybody involved. I don't think that it can be up to one standard, for example, for employment, or, you know, we're talking about the Canada Disability Benefit, for example, and what that means for people with disabilities, to get people with disabilities out of poverty and get them to a point where work is actually a feasible option, because they don't have to worry about if they're going to pick between daycare or bread or their rent, for example. That's the idea of the Canada Disability Benefit. But all of this is all still really new, and we don't know how it's going to play out. So we have, 16 years until 2040. It's not a lot. It's not a lot of time, but I think we've set it up properly. And I'm just going to go back, Alex, because I remembered the third point,
okay,
and that was that we felt that we should not have, there shouldn't be targets, for employers. So for example, it's talking, some parts of it, of the standard allude to the fact that there should be targeted. So like a ratio of people with disabilities working at federally regulated entities. And we're saying that there needs to be a benchmark, that we need to make sure that there's a benchmark, but targets can be quite limiting. And sometimes it can even tokenize people with disabilities. Like, we have to have somebody with a disability working for us, so we better get Joe in the mailroom, as opposed to really doing a benchmark of an organization and figuring out where they can expand their hiring practices of people with disabilities.
Now, Maureen, for yourself, you wear multiple hats. You're not only the president and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, but you're also a board member for the Accessibility Council. Like, how do you leverage both those roles and really push accessibility forward, and then specifically within the workplace and employment? Like, how have you been able to really push forth the accessibility of employment for Canadians?
So thanks for asking that question. And it's exhausting, but it's fascinating. And I think that the time is just right. You know, we talked about this a little bit earlier, that we've got our ducks set up right now. And I have seen, I'm able to tell people, I've seen a change since I started at CCRW back in 2012. I've seen a change for employment for people with disabilities. I've seen the stat change from less than 50% to 55%. And that's big. Like, that's huge. That tells me that all of the players are working in the right direction to push this forward, to make sure that we are noticing the talent of people with disabilities in Canada, and that we're not doing pity hires, that we're actually saying, hey, I need that innovation in my place. I want that innovation. I need that lived experience that will bring that innovation. And for businesses that are not thinking about that and that are not doing that, they're going to fall behind. We see a lot of businesses closing right now post-COVID, and there are a lot of reasons for that. But the labor market is probably the main one. It's tough to find people and hold on to people right now. And so if we don't modify our places of work, we're not going to succeed. So both my roles at Accessibility Standards Canada on the board and also at CCRW really allow me to bridge those two places of policy and practice to really to help move the needle, I think.
I'm curious, Maureen, what do you think the biggest barrier, hurdle, challenge right now when it comes to employment for folks with disabilities in Canada? Is there one thing that still needs the most work to address, to really kind of change, whether it's something perception or something more ingrained within our employment structures, that whether the standard has addressed or is trying to address?
So that's a really good question, and I think that the standard is trying to address this as well. But I would say it's stigma. I would absolutely say it's stigma. In a survey that CCRW did a few years ago, we asked employers, why do you think, these are the employers that, of course, we work with, so they've hired people with disabilities, and we asked them, why do you think that your colleagues are not hiring people with disabilities? And their answer came back and said, because they think that people with disabilities just can't do the job. And so that's the stigma. And we know that that's not true. But that's the pervasiveness of it. And I think that the exciting part for me, and this is why I think there has been a shift and why there will continue to be a shift, is that we're talking now. We're not talking about, oh, this poor person needs a job, and so we better give them a job. It's not about that. We're not talking about the rights of somebody to work. We're talking about the talent that they bring into the employment sphere. And with that shift, I think that, and that we continue to talk about that shift. Here, I'm at the ODEN conference this week. There's so many people in this room, and everybody in the room is talking about employment for people with disabilities. 22% of the population in Canada. That's a huge demographic. And so I think that if we are going to continue to have that conversation, that's the way we make the change.
Absolutely. And Maureen, you do such great work. You're so passionate. You're so involved in this topic and within this community. Where can folks go to learn more about the work you and your organization is doing and potentially get involved and help?
Thanks, Alex. That's great. So we'll give a little plug to the CCRW website, www.ccrw.org. We have a lot of really great resources on our website for both employers and for job seekers. We have a sister organization now that is helping businesses become disability confident. That's Innova, INNOVA, the Innova solution. They can help business, like I said, become disability confident. And also check out what we're doing with the Disability and Work in Canada initiative, DWC. We're having our conference in November. Again, thought creators sitting in the room talking about policy, really, really important stuff.
Maureen, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks so much again. Take good care.
That was my conversation with Maureen Haan. Maureen is the president and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. And you can learn more about her organization by visiting ccrw.org, ccrw.org. And for more details about the Accessibility Standards Canada, you can visit accessible.canada.ca, accessible.canada.ca.
Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI-télé or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI-télé or download the podcasts wherever you listen.